Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us to tell us more about your journey and your story. And one of the things I always like to start with is asking people one word they would use to describe their recovery journey.
Ooh, one word. There's so much to it. It's hard to encapsulate, but I would say resiliency. Resiliency of, resiliency really is, the definition of it is just getting through hard times. And that's in addiction and that's in recovery. It applies to both. So, yeah, I would say resiliency.
And why do you say resiliency? What makes you come up with that word from your journey?
Um, Well, resiliency, I think, is really what gets most of us through hard times. Addiction is it's so difficult. People don't, sometimes we talk about how trauma can cause addiction later in life, but we don't always address how traumatic addiction is itself. It's a very traumatic experience to go through. To be in this circle, this cycle of I need this, I don't have it, I'm sick, I'm doing XYZ for this. It's a morally you're not living to your own standards. And so having resiliency, I think, is the key for getting through hard times. Resiliency doesn't mean easy. It doesn't mean simple. It doesn't mean it'll be a smooth process, but it does mean you'll get through it.
Because I think a lot of people, that is something that they worry about. Like, will I be able to do this? Will I survive my addiction? Is there help for me? Did you ever feel like that in your process? Like, will I ever get better? Will this work for me? Or what were your thoughts in the height of your
um,
addiction?
I was in and out of recovery several, probably five to 10 good solid efforts before I got into treatment. I tried through 12 step. I tried through seeing a counselor. I tried a lot of different things. I tried medication. And, you know, I knew something was wrong. I didn't understand how close I was to things being irreversible. And I think that's often where we get in trouble in addiction is we don't realize how close we are to the edge. And, my philosophy is the only prerequisite to getting into recovery is being alive. Everything else is kind of we can fix, we can get through, we can work on, we can heal from, but you got to be alive to do it. And so um even working in this field, I always advocate for harm reduction. If you're not ready, at least be careful until you are ready. So that was something I had to really get into my head, understanding I was doing all kinds of driving intoxicated all the time and putting myself in really dangerous situations that I just didn't understand. Um, so that's when I talking earlier about addiction being traumatic. We get into these situations and we put ourselves in more likelihood of getting into traumatic situations and traumatic things happening to us. And so that's a little bit of my story as well. Is the further it went down, I went through addiction and got closer and closer to the end of it. It just got more and more scary, more and more dangerous. And I'm just so grateful that I'm able to be here now and that, I got through that because not all of us do. So, but yeah, I think harm reduction until you're ready is a big part of it. And it was a big part of it for me.
But one thing that I love that you said, Ashley, that was so important is you didn't give up. Because, after you think about the first attempt you tried, and then you're like, this didn't work, and you kept finding yourself going through this cycle. What kept you from giving up? I know you use the word resilience, but what kept you from giving up and keep giving it a try?
Um, you know, I was exposed to people in 12 step meetings very early on before I got into real recovery. But I was exposed to these people in 12 step rooms and I would hear them share their story and I'd sit in the back. I'd be sitting in the back, sweating, shaking, nervous to be there. And I would hear somebody up there tell their story about all they went through. And here they are, got 10 plus years or, own their own sober home or whatever they do. And just knowing, 12 step meetings gave me a lot of hope that I'm not there now. I don't know where I'm going to end up in a year, but those people did it. so maybe I can too. Hearing other people's stories is really what kept me going and kept me, because I had a lot of depression during that time. I had a lot of suicidal thoughts, a lot of suicidal ideation. But at the very end of it, it would always come to, well, that guy up there said it too. He said he had those thoughts too. And here he is. So I would just give it one more day at a time. I was living kind of one day at a time, even in addiction, really.
Mhm. But I think that's so powerful for you to even full circle be able to share your story now, knowing that while we're not in an AA meeting, we're on a platform that somebody who's struggling may hear you. What does that
Yeah.
feel like knowing that now you're the person sharing that story?
I'll probably have a lot of emotions about it later because it's like, it's so unreal. I never in a if you would have asked me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here in my own apartment in a nice area that I love, sitting on my own couch, if you would have asked me this is what I'd be doing right now, I would not have believed you. I never thought in a million years that I would be in the place I am today. So it's very unreal. And I'm excited to share with some of my friends this. And I don't talk about my recovery a lot. I think in the professional world of addiction, if you're in recovery, you're kind of told don't bring that up unless it's absolutely vital or, really critical to that moment. So I don't talk about my recovery very much. I'm always involved in everybody else's. So it's just very surreal and it's just so shocking to me. But it's really wonderful. It makes me feel so grateful for sure.
I can imagine because I want to go back through your story because we hear you now and people are looking at you. And like you said, you have your own apartment, you're living in a city that you love. You're actually now working in addiction treatment to help women and women who are pregnant, and you're giving back. But that wasn't you, like you said, 5 years ago. Where were you 5 years ago? What were you struggling with addiction wise? If you paint the opposite picture of where you are compared to where you are today.
Yeah. 5 years ago, an average day for me, I would have been waking up very sick, sweaty, shaking, crawling to the bathroom, that whole deal. Um, I would, alcohol was my substance of choice at the end, but I've struggled with opiates. I've struggled with amphetamines at different parts in my life. But alcohol was really the problem at the end for me. But I was just so physically ill all day. My body, I mean, I weigh I weigh a lot more than I did when I went into treatment, and sometimes I look at pictures of myself before I went in, and it's very like, "Whoa," I had no idea that I looked that sick. The other part of it, because we can talk all day about the physical, problems and things that come from substance use, but, I was at the time I was working, in the sex worker industry. I had kinda given up ever feeling like I was gonna be a normal person in the normal world.
Mm,
I never felt like I was gonna have a job. I didn't know how to be around normal people. I was around people in the clubs and in the alleyways and people late at night, and like those were my people. And so, an average day for me was how can I get over my sickness enough to try to go make some money to just go do it all again? Um,
mm,
I was living, particularly, I think what really pushed me into seriously considering recovery at that time was I was living in a situation where I was living with a past partner. It was not a really a emotionally or totally physically safe situation, and I felt so trapped. I felt like there was nowhere for me to go. I didn't. My credit was tanked. I could barely keep a dollar to my name. The idea of moving out on my own was just not even a possibility. So, I just felt really trapped, and I think in addiction, that's kinda where you get to before either you
mhm.
choose recovery or you keep going in, jails, institutions, and death. Though you kinda have those 2 choices, and I finally got there. that was what I chose as my bottom, you know. Everybody has a different low point where they decide they're not going to dig anymore, and mine
Mhm.
was realizing, like, you know, okay, I'm this physically ill. Um, what I was doing for a living was in itself very traumatic and very, it really hurt my spirit. I mean, it really put me in a dark place. That was a big part of it. And a lot of my substance use had to do with a lot of numbing.
Mhm.
So I just kept thinking, if I ride this out and I just, you know, I'll be okay. I had no clue what the next year would be. I couldn't think about next week. So you know, that was what life was like for me. It was just, it's so sad to think about. And a lot of the women I work with today have this life, and it's so, I just want to shake them and say, you can do this, you know. And I never thought I'd be able to do it, and I never thought I'd be able to leave that world. I always thought I was too damaged or had too many faults, too many character problems, characteristic problems. I
Mhm.
couldn't interact with people during the day. I'd go to the grocery store and I would just be in a puddle of sweat, just anxious just to even be around other people. So it was just a very awful way to live.
Mhm. So you talk about, you have this moment where it's kind of a survival thing that kind of
Mhm.
led you to seek treatment. How did you know where to go? How did you even find Greenhouse Treatment Center? Because I can imagine in that moment, there's a lot of panic going on. You said you're having all these thoughts. You're not where you want to be. You're concerned about your safety, but you're also struggling and living a life that you know isn't your best self. But how did you even know where to begin to find Greenhouse?
I have shared this a few times, and this is probably my favorite thing to share about my recovery story. One night, it was like any other night, nothing particularly good or bad had happened that day. I was really intoxicated. I don't really remember this night, to be honest with you. I was told about this night the next day. I looked on Google and searched for like 24/7 addiction line or 24/7 substance, something like that. And that's something I would have never had done during the day when I was coherent. I would have never done that because that for me was kind of admitting, like, this is a problem. But in
Mhm.
my altered state, that was what I did. And this guy picked up the phone. His name's Tyler. I don't know his last name. I know he's in Tennessee and he is with American Addiction Centers, y'all's call center. I don't know exactly what it's called, but not only did that man he kept me alive for a good month. I mean, I truly credit my life to him. It makes me like tear up thinking about it because um we just never know, like, who we're affecting. We never
Mhm.
know how our interaction can change a person's life. And Tyler spoke to me that night. I don't remember it. He called me the next day. He kind of like filled in the gaps for me and said, listen, you don't have to do anything right now, but when you're ready, just give me a call. I called him again and I was just like, you know, I'm probably going to die like this and I don't want to. I don't know what I want, but I know it's not this. And I feel like I can get through this, but I'm not sure where to go. And this is such a big problem for anybody in addiction is where do you start? There's so many resources. There's IOP and PHP and inpatient and sober. There's just so many things to choose from. You don't know what's meant for you. You don't know financially if you can handle, you know, what you're getting yourself into either. Um, and so Tyler not only led the way for me on in terms of finding Greenhouse Treatment Center in Grand Prairie in Texas, but he led me through the whole insurance process. I didn't have insurance at the time. I, I put enough money together over the course of a month to pay for like 2 or 3 months of my insurance premium to get into Greenhouse because
Mhm.
there was just no other way I was going to do it, you know. And that's another problem with our system is it's not meant for people who have financial challenges. It's just not.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that man, and I haven't spoken to him since, but he just really, he'd check in with me every few days through that month long process where I was waiting from when I made that initial call to when I was admitting. He kind of checked in with me every few days. And man, that guy was my lifeline. He felt like the only person who believed in me. And that was what I really needed at that time because I didn't believe in myself. So when we talk about how can we help people in recovery or in addiction and get them to even contemplate recovery, be kind to them and speak spirit into them and be good to them because they already hate themselves. They already have their families who hate them. They already feel like, an outcast. Like you saying mean things to them is not going to make them feel any worse because they already feel that. So Tyler really did that for me. And I really appreciate that y'all had that service. That really changed my life. And I know I can't be the only person. So for sure. Thank you so much for AAC having that. Saved my life.
Well, the thing I think about too, when you say that, Ashley, it goes back to that word resilience, because you could have given up on yourself too during that time. But the fact that you went and got the money and said, I know that there's hope, it shows why the word resilience so connects with you, because that shows something deep inside of you to keep going, even to answer the call or even to do everything that you did when you made the decision to go to greenhouse treatment. Did you ever have any fears about going to treatment once you got through the process and you're like, you're going to go? Because I think there are a lot of misconceptions. Like, what is treatment? What to expect? Am I different than everybody else? Like, I know there has to be a lot of anxiety. What were your concerns or fears that you were thinking about?
Yeah. Well, I want to address something real quick you said earlier. I did not entirely go to treatment when I went because I was ready to get sober. I went because I kind of had nowhere else to go. I had nowhere else to live. And I knew it would be a safe place that I could have a meal, that I wouldn't be hurt, and that I wouldn't have to keep doing the job I'd been doing for so many years. Like that was my primary motivator. And, people aren't always motivated for the right reasons, but if it gets them to the right place, like that's enough. So that was what got me there. My first, I was terrified when I went to treatment. Actually, the first time I went, it was it was like right after COVID. And I had COVID the first time I went, and they told me I had to leave and I had to come back in 2 weeks. So I had to walk into treatment twice. And it
Mhm.
was just like the first time I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And then the second time I was just like, am I really like, this is my chance to not have to do this. So, and that's just in essence kind of the difficulties of what COVID did to the healthcare industry and the recovery industry. But when going to treatment, I was terrified. I had never really felt much genuine connection with other people before. I'm an only child. I live states away from my family. I've always isolated myself, and that's my own fault. Like I've chosen to keep myself away from others most of my life up until getting into recovery. And so I just didn't understand what it would be like to really connect with someone who
Mhm.
was on the same journey as me. And I just thought I was going to walk into this place and I kind of looked at it as like it be like jail, like kind of how like jail you mind your business and you don't, you don't mess with people and you don't say hi, you don't be too smiley. Oh, my cat's coming to join. Um, but you know, after being there about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I kind of made my first connection, where I was talking with someone who, by the way, we're still amazing friends. I was talking with her and she was sharing her story with me, and it was so amazing because for the first time in my life, I felt understood. I didn't feel like a weirdo. I didn't feel like an outcast or a loner. I felt like this person really gets me. Maybe I really do belong here. And as time passed, treatment for me kind of reminds me of like junior high school or high school, maybe, where you're kind of in this group of people. And addiction, you spend 10 years, 15 more years in addiction, you're not really mentally, you're not really your physical age. You tend to kind of act more the age of when you last didn't use or drank. And it's kind of a group of, we're a little more immature, we're you know um I had such a blast. And once I got through that that barrier of feeling scared and nervous, once I just let myself experience it, and especially once I got through the detox process, because I think that's a lot of people's trouble with treatment is they've never gotten much past the detox process. So they don't understand that it gets better. Like life does you feel better. So once I got through that and I opened myself up to speak with other people and to let my, be vulnerable with others, I realized that's where I belonged. And it was a wonderful thing. And yeah, me and this girl, we're still friends to this day. She lives in Louisiana, but we talk all the time.
How awesome is that to be able to have that level of connection, to go to treatment, meet someone, but feel for the first time like there are other people who get you, like you're not out there on your own, that this isn't just a you problem, right? That there are
Right.
so many people that are struggling with addiction and so many people that are going through similar journeys as yourself. So you're going through treatment. When did you start to have some aha moments that I can get better? Wow, something is going wrong with me. Addiction is a disease. It's not a moral issue. Like, when did you start to have that aha moment?
Um, I had a counselor there that just really understood me. She had a story very similar to mine as well, and she really understood what I was going through. And she did some one-on-one work with me that just has changed my life, has permanently changed my life in an amazing way. She really taught me, I had never been emotionally vulnerable, especially in sobriety. It had always taken a lot of substances for me to ever even open up to people. I had a lot of social anxiety back then, and it took something to get me to even talk. And so, being able to speak with this woman, she just really changed my perspective on the fact that I am not my past, and my past does not have to define me for today. Now, I can choose to let it define me. That's my choice, but life's a lot harder that way. It's a lot harder to be healthy and to be happy when you assume that, well, because I've lived this certain way for so long, that's all I'm worth. I had a lot of self-worth issues. I had felt like I'd made all these mistakes and I wasn't deserving of being happy and sober.
Mm.
That wasn't for me. Um, so it takes a lot of, having good clinicians there, I think. And at that time when I was there, there were some amazing clinicians that really changed my view of recovery. Particularly, I can't remember his name, but there was one therapist who did a psycho ed group, and he said something like, "Your brain is not your friend," and that has just stuck with me forever because our brains alter and change, and we crave what's familiar. And what's familiar isn't always good for us. So he really changed my view on, this isn't just my choices. This is my brain choosing some of this.
And I think that's a huge revelation for a lot of people to
Mhm.
have, know that it's not just me. Like this is something bigger than just me trying to do this or my own willpower. I think that's really powerful. So what would you say when you got ready to leave treatment were the big things that you walked away with?
I walked away with, gosh, I walked away with a lot of knowledge about the brain, about addiction, about substance use in general that I just didn't know. And knowledge is so powerful. I think once we learn about how our bodies behave and the different chemicals and our hormones and how our brain works, we learn all this and it makes sense. It's like, oh, I'm not just doing this because I'm crazy, or I'm not crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. My body has just gotten used to this. So learning about the biology of addiction really changed a lot for me. Um, and really getting comfortable with accepting myself and accepting my past. Um, that was a really big part of it too. I had to forgive myself for a lot, and I wasn't ready to do that. And my counselor and my peers, I mean, they just kind of pushed me over the edge and said, you might only be here once. Why don't you give this a shot and really forgive yourself? And so I know my counselor, she did a lot of amazing work with me on writing letters to myself and writing letters to my past self and really doing a lot of exercises with me to kind of ingrain in my mind, like, I forgive myself. And that self forgiveness is absolutely key to achieving things later in recovery if you don't feel you can forgive yourself, it's hard to forgive others. If you don't feel like you forgive yourself, you kind of feel doomed to, well, I deserve this bad life. I
Mhm.
deserve to be in addiction. It perpetuates that shame, and you know, a lot of addiction does have to do with the shame and the guilt of what you've done in your past. So really just walking away with, I forgive myself. And that was a huge, huge part of it. And the other thing too was, there were some treatment advocates there. There were some, gosh, there were all kinds of employees there. But as I got to know them, like they wouldn't even be counselors or really, you know, they could be a janitor, they could be anybody in there. How many people in there were in recovery? And how
Mhm.
many of them, I had no idea that average people around me could be in recovery. I thought I would always know, or I just couldn't comprehend that these normal people, and they spoke so much life into me and they gave me so much hope. And it really transformed my view about, it's okay to be normal and ordinary. You know, I don't have to have this crazy um extensive life that's loud and proud, and I don't need to scream from the rooftops about my recovery every day. Like, I don't have to live that way. And that's also something I was afraid of, was that if I do this, that's all I'm ever going to be, is my recovery. And although that's a big part of my life, that's not all of my life now. And so meeting those employees there that, you know, you wouldn't have ever known, and here they are, got a couple years sober, and they're working at a treatment center because they like helping people, like, that gave me a lot of hope, and it really inspired me just for my future in general.
Mhm. Was it while you were in treatment that you made the connection that, maybe I want to go back and help other people? Or was it later down?
Yeah. Yeah, it was I definitely wanted to at that time. It took a while for me to really feel the not the motivation, but feel like it was truly possible. I needed more time in recovery to get to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to school and I'm ready to be really serious about it. But my counselor there, she shared a lot about her life that really inspired me. That maybe, you know, helping people is kind of where I belong. And even in the past, in when I was a teenager and working retail jobs or whatever I've done in my life, I've always liked being around people. I've always enjoyed having conversations with people that are emotional or really in depth, and learning deeply about somebody. And so that's something I've always gravitated towards. But um, you know, once you get into recovery, and people in addiction, you know, they don't realize what kind of gift they have. It's such a gift to be able to work with others and say, I've been there. Like, not everybody gets to say that. And
Mhm.
it's just such a gift to give to people, or to tell people, like, you have this. And so don't throw it away. You know, someone may need to hear your story in the future. And that's kind of how I felt at the time, was like, maybe I can contribute in some way. I didn't know what way yet, but I definitely felt inclined towards that.
So let's go from you're leaving treatment, you've had this experience, you're walking away with these tools. What was that first year like? Because I think for a lot of people, getting through the first year is one of the scariest things or biggest challenges. So what was that first year like for you?
The first year, well, what I immediately did when I was done with my 30 days of inpatient, I spent about another 30 days in sober living. That was very beneficial for me. I still needed some help. I still needed help adjusting to the world, and how to brush my teeth every morning, and how to eat at the right times. And, you know, I had gotten, you spend 30 days in inpatient, you get all this in depth. I mean, there's just so much that gets thrown at you. And then you realize, like, oh, I got to remember how to do just regular stuff now.
Mm,
So learning how to have a schedule, and self care, you know, washing my hair every other day or whatever, doing my skincare, taking care of myself and my body. Those were all things I had to relearn because I hadn't done those things in years. So I think sometimes in early recovery, we underestimate just how much we have to learn, and how much we have
mhm,
to, like, accomplish and learn how to do and really work towards. So I left treatment or I left sober living. I left sober living, and one of the employees there let me drive to the gas station and fill up my tank, and she went in with me. And it was the first time I had been out in public,
Mm,
kind of on my own, was with her. And she was like, okay, we're going to get all the snacks you need. We're going to get like everything you need. So I wouldn't have to stop on my way driving back to Indiana, which was like a 14-hour drive. And I was really worried about that long, lonely 14-hour drive. And I've made that drive many times in my life, and it's always been not fun. It leaves me cranky. I'm irritable. And I was really worried that like that was going to be my first thing I had to do getting out. So she really helped structure and put together like, okay, here's how your trip's going to go. And like, let's plan it all the way through. Um, so learning, I can't just assume things work out. Early recovery, you have to plan everything. You
mhm,
can't assume you'll have the willpower. You can't assume you'll have the motivation in that moment. Um, be smart, not rely what is it? Be smart, not strong. It's something I learned from school, but be smart in your recovery. Don't rely on your willpower. Don't rely on your strength. Don't think, oh, I can be around those people. I have the willpower to get through that. Don't even put yourself there.
mhm.
I really adhered to that in early sobriety. I just listened to what people told me to do, and I just did it. I knew that my way of living was not going to work. So, having what I consider mentors and people from treatment that I was still talking with, clients and employees, that were still guiding me and still helping me in my journey. Um, I just listened to them and I just did what they told me to do. And it wasn't fun. I mean, it was brutal sometimes. I think in addiction, we have such a big ego about things, and having to put my ego down and just do what I'm told that's not in my character. And so the first year for me, gosh, I moved up to Indiana. I ended up moving back down to Texas. I got my first job. I worked at a gas station.
Full circle
That
moment.
job,
You went to the gas
that
station.
yeah,
Full
yeah,
circle
for
moment
sure.
there, right?
It was like I had never I didn't realize how snobby in my addiction I was. I thought I was too good to work at a place like that. I thought, you know, even though I'm doing all of these things that morally and ethically don't align with my values, there's no way I'll be at a gas station, or there's no way I'd serve or, do anything like that. And it was the most humbling, and it really changed my perspective on work and the meaning of work. And I worked the opening shift that started at 5 a.m. And over the course of like a month and a half, I was given a key to open up the store every morning. And that was like my first really big win for me in my recovery. I was probably like 4 to 5 months sober. And for the first time in my life, I was trusted to do something. And I was going to do what I said I was going to do. Like I followed through and I could be relied upon. And I hadn't felt that in so long. Um,
Mm.
so, we can't think that we're too good to do things. It's okay to start low and start small, and don't overestimate like I have to be doing XYZ by the end of my first year. Don't do that to yourself. You end up really hurting yourself because then you're setting yourself up to fail,
Yeah.
and
You
so
literally had to like rebuild your life, Ashley. It's like you're starting from the ground up. So you're like, okay, what am I going to do? Like you said, it's the basics, like remembering to take care of yourself. Then you're like, okay, I got to have a job. Okay, I've got it. Like all these things. So you had to like rebuild your life.
yeah, majorly. And that was, I think it was such a blessing that I had to do that. I believe I had to do that too. I don't
Mhm.
think there's a shortcut. There's really no shortcut in recovery. You kind of just have to learn it the hard way and learn it as you go. There's no book you can read that's going to fast forward you to a year in and you've got all those skills at 2 months. It just doesn't work like that. But working at that job, I had the same customers that came in every day, and I found a lot of purpose in that job. I was sometimes the first person someone would interact with for their workday. And I felt a lot of worth in that. Like I'd help them get a cup of coffee, I'd grab them their cigarettes they wanted. I just felt like I was a part of community for the first time. And I had a lot of customers that would come in and be excited to see me at 5 a.m. And I've just never been that person, And so it was really, it was really an awesome experience. And I'm so grateful I got hired there because that was my biggest fear coming into recovery was like, what am I going to do for work? I don't even know how to be around other people. And I was really low in skills. I was really low in people skills at that time. And so I'm really grateful for that woman who hired me. She took a chance on me and it benefited me so much. Um, yeah, after working there, I worked there for a few months and then I moved down back to Texas. I moved into my own apartment. I had a friend, she owns a ranch. She actually, we had known each other for many years, but she didn't keep in close contact with me throughout my addiction for boundaries and because it wasn't good for her to be around. And, once she knew that I was really getting into my recovery, she invited me to come down and help her out on her ranch. And so I did a lot of outdoor work and that was amazing. And I love nature. And so being able to do that in my life, I tell people like, if you just keep doing the right thing, things just kind of fall into place. Like, what is the next right decision I can make right here? Let me do the right thing and it'll work. And if it doesn't work, there's maybe a lesson in there for you to learn, because sometimes life is bad and it's, in recovery, it's not like nothing bad happens, but we're just able to handle it now. I can get
Mhm.
through a tragedy now and I can be relied upon and I can support my friends in the tragedy or my family. I can support myself without going to use destructive measures. And I can be alive and stay through a tragedy now and handle it, get through it, learn something about myself through it, and grow in my resiliency through that as
Mhm.
well.
There's
But
that
yeah,
word
first year's
again.
pretty crazy. Yeah. But no, the first
Resiliency.
year of recovery is just like, it's so much to take in. And yeah, it's a lot.
But you are proof that you can do it. And not only did you do it, but then you end up going back to school and finding this new profession where you're able to help people in addiction treatment. So, what has that been like at this point? I know you said it's still surreal when you kind of were describing it, but how did you know, okay, I've got to go back to school. This is the next step. I'm going to, pursue this with my whole heart.
Yeah, I into my childhood and really up until my teenage years when I kind of went off the rails, I was great in school. I've always enjoyed learning. I've always valued learning. I feel like I was raised in a way that there was a lot of education in my household growing up. So I was always learning something new growing up. And that's something that's been with me my entire life. And unfortunately, in addiction, we don't get to participate in those things. We're not as capable of mentally enjoying learning because it's just we're under the influence. There's physically we can't do it, all kinds of reasons. And so being in recovery, I remember reading some of my first books in recovery and how joyful of an experience that was because I had never been able to read a book before in addiction. I just couldn't sit there long enough. I'd fall asleep, I'd pass out, or I couldn't remember, or there was always something, and it just never. I couldn't enjoy that. And there's, reading's been a big place for me of peace when I need to kind of pour into myself. But no, I started college and I started at a community college in my town. And I started just with two classes and I just didn't know how it was going to go. I was a high school dropout. So I just didn't know, like, here I am in my late 20s, it's been 15 years since I've been in a classroom. Like, I don't know what this is going to be for me. Um, but I ended up taking psychology and an English class. And in psychology, I just loved every second of it. I ate that class up. I loved it so much. And I realized, there was a unit in the class about addiction, and the professor talked about, there's a program here to become a chemical dependency counselor, and our school offers that. And so I ended up meeting with that professor over that program. What is crazy is the director of that program of our college. She was somebody I used to talk with at AA meetings years ago. She herself is in recovery, but I met her years and years ago at AA 12-step meetings. And I already had her phone number because she offered to be my sponsor at one point in time. And so when I meet this woman, I'm like, I know you from somewhere. um, a big part of, I think a big part of the educational experience is having professors and educators that really care about their job and really support their students. And that's who she was. She has been the most amazing support for me. Um, I have sat in her office and cried. She's really she's really changed my ability. Having that support system is so important, and it's hard to build a support system in recovery and early recovery because you've pushed so many people away. Your family maybe doesn't trust you. There are all these things going on, and it's hard to you kind of have to prove yourself to people. And that doesn't mean that we still don't need some support. And so she was that person for me and still is that person for me. Um,
Oh,
but I started those chemical dependency counselor classes, and it turns out, of the 20 students in my cohort, like 18 of them are in recovery. And so we it was kind of like a recovery meeting when I went to class. It was really a cool experience. But I finished that program a little less than a year ago, and got my chemical dependency counselor intern license. And then around that time, I completed my recovery support peer specialist certification as well, which is another educational way of getting to share your story and help others. So, but yeah, school has been really great because it's given me something to really pour into, and has given me some drive and motivation, and given me a lot to look forward to. That is so important. We've got to have things to look forward to. Some of us I initially made these big goals. I'm going to get my master's, and like that's great, and maybe I will, but let's talk about what can I do in the next year or two that I can reap the rewards of and be proud of. And I'm actually starting my I'll be into my third year of my bachelor's for social work at University of Texas in Arlington this fall. So I'm so excited to just keep going. It's been really great, and getting to you know being in recovery and having that first person experience, and then learning like everything that counselor at Greenhouse was doing with me, and getting to learn it from the professional's perspective has been so amazing for me. And it's kind of helped my treatment even more. Like the treatment I received at Greenhouse, it's made it even better almost 4 years later, because I'm really learning about these techniques, and about different addictive issues and challenges and how the brain works. And you just learn all that, and you realize like, oh, I remember my counselor doing that thing with me back then, and that was so
mhm.
helpful. And so you get both experiences.
Well, I just have a couple last questions for you. One,
Yeah.
speaking of forgiveness, I know you said, I'm sure just rebuilding relationships. Did you go through that process of rebuilding? You talk about your friend who you had been estranged from during your height of your addiction, but you reconnected with her. What was that process like for you? And did you try to make amends or connect with other people in your life who had maybe grown distant from you during that time?
Yeah. Amends are a difficult thing. There are still some people in my family who I'm working on that I still think I have some work to do. And it kind of is a never ending thing because we don't realize the hurt and the pain we cause others. I have somebody really close to me in my life right now who is in active addiction, and I've been going to Al-Anon for that kind of support as being a family or friend of a person in addiction. And being in the other set of shoes, and that perspective has really transformed the way I see amends, and the way I see trust, and the way I see relationships. I had no clue that I was causing people that amount of pain. I didn't know.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's so hard to explain to my family members, my parents, that I didn't mean to. I wasn't intentional. I didn't know, but it doesn't change the fact that it still happened, and they were still hurt. So we got to really kind of step up, be courageous, and really just walk the walk. because that's at the end of the day, they've heard sorry a million times. I've said the word sorry before I got into recovery so many times, and I meant it. That's not to say I didn't mean it, but I didn't follow through with my actions, and so they didn't believe it. um, we've got to really show that we value them, whoever that person is. We value them, and here's how I value you. I value you because I return your phone calls, or I pick up the phone when you call. I value you because I'll come dog sit for you while you're on vacation, or I want to go out and have dinner with you. I used to just bail on everything in my life. I never went out with anybody to do anything because I couldn't be relied upon. So making those amends, I think, has to be a living, breathing process. It's not a necessarily just a letter you write or a phone call you make. It's here's what I do every day to show I mean what I say, when this is my new way of living and I'm not going to hurt you again. And it's so hard because we feel so bad. I would do anything in this world to take back the pain I've caused my family and friends, but I can't. So the next best thing I can do is live in this moment, in recovery. That's the best thing I can do now.
That's so powerful. Ashley, that was so powerful the way you said that it's like this journey of making amends. And I think also like being on the other side of it as a friend or caring for someone, to be able to see it through a different lens, which one is going to help you be an amazing, therapist, or, as you go through your bachelor's and all of that, or social work that you're working on, to be able to see all sides. Like, you've gotten all sides, from someone who's lived it, then from someone who's loved someone, to someone who's studying it. So you will just be able to touch so many people just from the perspective that you've been able to get. And I can just hear it in your story. And so as I wrap up, I always like to ask a lot of people this, but how would you describe what recovery is like?
Ooh, that's a good question. Recovery is like, um, the way I see recovery, I used to see recovery as this plan. I'm going to plan out the next several years, and I'm going to be thinking about the future all the time, and I'm going to be future tripping, and I'm not going to be, I won't be thinking about the past anymore. And that's half right. That's half right, because we want to not be stuck in the past anymore. But we also can't be stuck in the future either. And I've really learned in the several years I've been in this place now of, um, really, I guess saying meditation and mindfulness has really made a huge impact on my recovery. And that's really kind of what recovery is for me. The recovery is the present moment. What am I doing in this present moment? That's all I have. That's all I'm guaranteed. And so I really strongly, I try to encourage all my clients. Like, I used to be one of those people that heard meditation or mindfulness and think that was like wooey, or for Oprah, or for, somebody like that's really calm. And, I didn't think that was for me. Um, Meditation and mindfulness has changed my life and really changed my recovery. And I've only really gotten into it over the last year, but it's really allowed me to just be okay with right now. And that's really the hardest thing with addiction, is we're never okay with the moment. Addiction is a problem of wanting to control everything. And I'm not comfortable with the way I feel right now. How can I change that? In recovery, we have to just contemplate and acknowledge the way we feel right now and just sit with it. We have to learn to do that. And that takes skill and it takes practice, but it gets better the more you do it. So that's the cool thing about recovery, is it does get a little bit easier as you move into it. The first year versus year 4 are completely different things to me. And year 4, I don't think about and obsess about substances anymore. It only comes up when I'm focused on it. I'm talking to somebody who's talking about it, or I'm reading a book about it, but I don't think about it anymore. And I never thought I'd be free of that. But a big part of that has just been focusing on this moment. We say one day at a time, 24 hours at a time. Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time, 30 minutes at a time. Whatever that at a time is that you need, like, that's what'll get you through, because all those moments add up. And before you know it, you wake up and you've got several years under your belt, and it doesn't seem that way almost. It really just kind of starts to fly by when you're really doing the work of just being okay with the presence.
So many golden nuggets in your story, Ashley. Thank you so
Thanks.
much for being willing to share your journey with us. And before we end this episode, is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't ask you? Because I know I asked you, I threw a lot of stuff at you because I wanted to understand your journey more, but I always want to give you a chance to touch on anything that I missed, just in case.
Um, no, I mean, no, I think the only thing I would add is that a lot of people, when they are in addiction and then they get into recovery, we might consider, and I did this for a long time, I thought my childhood was normal and good. And as I've learned more in my life and have read more on the topic and have interacted with more professionals in the field, sometimes things aren't normal. We're just used to them. And so never sell yourself short that you're struggling because you think it wasn't that big of a deal. You know, never sell yourself short on how difficult something is that you're going through or have been through because other people have it worse. Sometimes in the recovery space, people can get into this game of, well, I had it worse than you, so you shouldn't be complaining. And it's like, well, what I went through and what you went through are different, but they're both the hardest things we've each been through. And that's what
Mm, yeah.
matters. So, how can we exchange our emotions and stories in recovery through that and connect through that? But really take a look into your past for anybody who is in early recovery and work with a. I really advise people to get with a professional and really talk and get into these experiences about your childhood that you still think about to this day. Because there's a reason that we have these recurring thoughts. And once I finally addressed that, it's really changed my life in such an amazing way and has made recovery a lot easier because I don't feel the need to numb or to try to forget or to run away from things anymore. I just know that that wasn't normal. I've done my healing through it and I've grown and I'm over it, and I can recall it if I want, but it doesn't haunt me anymore. And so that can be a really amazing ticket to long lasting, happy sobriety. And that's the key part is happy and joyful. You can be sober, but you can be miserable.
So there is joy in recovery. I love that. So thank you once again, Ashley. And that's going to do it for your episode of My Recovery Story. We so appreciate you sharing it with us and being so open and transparent.
Thank you so much for having me and thank you for having this platform.